This episode is brought to you by Amplify, a team of fractional CFOs helping business owners finally make sense of their numbers. If you've ever felt like you're guessing your way through financial decisions, you need to talk with these folks. Amplify helps with forecasting and scenario planning, but what really stands out is how their guides walk alongside you with clear reporting that shows the next best step for your business. Their forecasts are dynamic, so you can actually see how future decisions will impact your cash in real time. I've also been loving their framework called Cash Flow Mountain, which visualizes how cash moves through your business like water down a mountain. It's a great way to see how your scorecard connects to the VTO through your financials. Head on over to amplify.business to check it out or schedule a free call so you can stop guessing about your numbers and start making confident decisions about the future of your business. Welcome to the Ambitious Coach Lab, powered by 90. I'm your host, Dr. Cam Lawson. Each week, we explore the real tactics, tough conversations, and breakthrough moments that drive coaching success. Let's jump into today's episode. Well, hello, friends. I am so excited to introduce my good friends, Ben and Brittany Cooper with Amplify. They are a creative fractional CFO firm, which I'm so excited to dive into. What does that mean? Because I usually don't think creative and finance, CFOs, they don't usually go together. But you guys sit in the finance seat and help business owners forecast better to make better business decisions. So we're going to dive all into how you guys built your practice and our personal relationship of how we met originally. But welcome to the show, you both. I'm excited about this.
Thank you, Cam. We're so excited to be here.
Thanks for having us. We love it.
We'll let people behind the scenes a little bit. This is actually second run through for us. We did it originally one time, and it was all messed up. The video and audio is crazy, so we'll blame technology on now.
We're gonna expect so much more because
second time around.
I'm telling you, I'm setting the bar high right from the start. We just we got it. We gotta hit it. So. No, but we're gonna run through this and it's gonna be awesome. But to kick it off, why don't you guys share a little bit of your just entrepreneurial background and how you got to building Amplify to what it is today?
Yeah. So Cam, you mentioned creative CFO. I think it does go in that order in some ways because before starting Amplify a decade ago, I was in the music industry. So if you're watching the video version of this conversation, there are guitars hanging behind us. And even the name Amplify is tied to, yeah, you got one too, Cam. The name Amplify is actually also a reference to the music background and the time I spent in Nashville, as a professional songwriter and getting into the music industry. And it was really fun. But it's not just, I'm not the only one who has the creative background. Brittany also was a freelance writer and journalist. So we got a chance to kind of do kind of the freelance hustle together in those early years of marriage. And then we started having kids. We had 2 at the time, and now we have 4. But when we realized, oh man, buying diapers it's really expensive as a songwriter and a freelance journalist. So we got to figure out how we can, help people buy the diapers, make a living. And so that led to a transition out of the music industry. And coming back to my numbers roots, really, I grew up around finance. My dad was in a few different roles around finance. And so it was a chance to come back to numbers in some ways, and got an MBA, and we lived in Austin, Texas for a stretch. And it was just a neat experience to realize that even some of the things that I was doing in the music industry, collaborating with people and creative problem solving, and even things like signal flow in recording and cash flow in finance, there were some parallels there that made it really fun to make that transition. So had a chance to work with some investors in Nashville, and in due diligence conversations, found that there were a lot of business owners who needed some help and needed to look at their numbers in a more creative way, maybe, and had an opportunity to step into more of a CFO type relationship with them.
Yeah. I mean, Nashville is it is funny because on one hand, it feels like kind of an odd path to, finance. But also Nashville is such a creative city where there are all these, people are always starting companies and doing creative things. So Ben had been really involved in an entrepreneur center, and he had a minor in entrepreneurship. And so we had always kind of been involved in, these really fun small businesses. And so then after grad school, it was just really natural to start helping them with their numbers. And so some of our earliest clients were actually like really fun, artistic Nashville companies, like that people knew of. And it was just really fun. It was just kind of a new way to engage in the city. And so that's
I think it is. The work we do connects really deeply with creative entrepreneurs, founders who didn't start their business because they love spreadsheets or building forecasts. And it's a great opportunity for us to come alongside them in a really hospitable, empathetic way and recognize, you're really great at the thing that you do and why you started your business. And that's why your customers come to you. And so we want to support you in a way that you may honestly have some head trash and shame about. That's one thing that we run into with a lot of entrepreneurs, just because, you might get to a point where you're making millions of dollars a year and you realize, I feel a little nervous admitting to anybody I don't know how to look at a profit and loss statement.
Yeah.
And so we really care about coming alongside in a non-judgmental way and say, we love the creative work that you do as well, and we want to support that.
It almost puts the psychological like walls that kind of go up around finance and like, ooh, I feel like if I'm a business owner, I should have, my head screwed on straight around these things. And there are often a lot of people, myself included, who would not be a stereotypical numbers person, that it is a little intimidating. And so it almost, I think your branding on like the creative and Amplify it kind of like lowers my, not fear, but just that like psychological hurdle I have to get over about talking about finance, which is actually really, it seems like that was an intentional decision from you guys.
Yeah, I think and to be transparent, like I have a journalism background. I was working for magazines in Nashville. And so I am very much like I'm our words girl. So I'm also not a numbers person. I'm not one of our guides. I do branding and marketing. So anything that we put out, I always want to make sure it makes sense to me, and that I'm understanding any resource, anything we're trying to help business owners with. We have a very low tolerance for kind of industry speak and, just intimidating words that we may understand or finance people may understand, but like the average business owner ends up feeling like they slept through a finance class in college that they were supposed to be at, right? And it's like, so we've been really intentional. And I think that's just come from years of doing the work and realizing like the pain point on numbers, people not understanding their numbers. There are multiple pain points, but it's not just about, and coaches understand this, people understand this. It's not about everyone saying like, I just want to get rich, like let's 10x this thing. It's somebody coming to you saying, I'm building a thing that matters. I love it. It's going well. And I'm not sleeping well at night, and I'm really worried about if I'm going to be in business in 3 months, even though I have X number of dollars in the bank, or I'm about to hire someone. The pain points are small and practical and very human. And so, anybody working with these business owners knows like the numbers are just a means to an end, and they're more about like the opportunity that it affords. It's more about building a business that allows you to have the life that you actually want. And that's not just what somebody else tells you, or, sometimes people come to us and they're like, I think I'm supposed to grow 18% year over year because I listened to a podcast about it. And it's like, well, let's actually look at that. Is that actually what you want? Is that what you need? Is that going to align with the things in your life that you care about? Maybe you're a parent and you want more time with your kids, or you're trying to hire someone. So I think that intentionality comes because you can have all the impressive numbers. You could have, we call it the multi-tab spreadsheet. Sometimes, people go to a CFO and they get a huge multi-tab spreadsheet. But at the end of the day, if you don't understand how to use it, you're still going to be awake at night. So we try to do everything with hospitality and a real understanding and a curiosity about who is this person and what does, success, I guess, look like for them. And then how do we get there in that forecast, right?
Well, and to add to that, there are a couple ways that we like to use the language. We want to help business owners avoid making $1 million decisions with their gut.
Yeah.
And there are a couple ways that could look. One is, I just don't know how to look at the numbers at all. And so as I'm trying to evaluate, do we open another location? Should we buy a truck for the business? Do we hire these next 3 people? Or should we raise prices or change? All these variables are at play, and that can be a place where you feel like you're making $1 million decision with your gut. Another place is, like Brittany was talking about, there's so many definitions of success that if you aren't really crystal clear on what the why behind and your business and what you're hoping the business can provide outside of the work that you do and the balance sheet and the cash flow statement, all that stuff, that's another moment where you might be following a very clear formulaic approach to, 10x your business, or do something that, again, some podcasts may be saying, this is exactly, if you want to grow this type of business, here's the playbook. And that can be helpful unless you feel like it's going in a different direction than you really care about. And that's another place where your gut is not going to feel good making big decisions following someone else's game plan. So I think there are a couple ways that can play out.
Yeah. I love the intentionality around that. And I love the combo where you have kind of the quote unquote numbers person and the words person, because that probably keeps you guys grounded. And I think it actually segues really well into one of the things that we talk about a lot on this show for, when coaches or firms like you all and consultants, that when they're thinking about their practice, you have to be clear on your why. You have to be clear on the understanding of both your problem that you're solving for, and then how are we going to position ourselves. It kind of goes a little bit into offering too, of like, here's what we're coming to help to solve. And so this is the start of our relationship, was at the EOS conference, right? And so can you guys talk a little bit about what led you to just choosing, you guys focus, it seems, kind of in the EOS ecosystem, which is a lot of small businesses who run on an intentional operating system, usually growth-minded individuals. But can you talk a little bit about how your vision just played really well in that ecosystem?
We had a season a couple years ago where we kind of just sent Ben off to multiple conferences. We're like, let's find our people.
Where are our people?
Right. Where are they?
We had been a kind of smaller business. We were starting to scale. And so we just sort of sent Ben out to be like, find the best fit. We tried a variety of conferences, and EOS just aligned really clearly with kind of this life of meaning stuff that we're talking about. And I think the benefit for us when someone's using an operating system or someone's, sitting with an implementer is they already know the why. So for us to come in, they understand already, like they've had to set some pretty big goals on their VTO, right? To say, where am I going in 1, 3, 10 years? Like what, why do I care about this? Where do I want to be? But then at the same time, they're then tasked with, okay, so what do I do this week, right? You've got to set those scorecard activities. And so sometimes when you're in a system like that, you're still left to do some of the numbers work on your own, even if you have a great implementer. And so we just, as we were getting more and more in the US community, people were just saying like, oh man, this would be amazing to have this kind of forecasting and this kind of finance work to help you see, if I make these decisions this week, if I pull this lever, if I change this, how does that impact my ETA to these goals I'm talking about? And so I think whenever you can start with a really clear kind of end game in mind and a clear understanding of what you're doing right now, that just is a great setup for us to come in and like do the forecasting work and be able to show someone, in a really great forecast, you can say like, what if you do this and this, what if you raise prices, but you lose this percentage of your customers, and then the economy does this, and you can just ask a lot of questions in real time and see kind of how things will likely change. But if you have the initial inputs, it's just so helpful. And then we're not the ones always having to guide through like, what does an end goal, where do you want to be in 10 years? What's your hope? And just kind of leaning on the implementers for that work. And being able to add the numbers. What would you add to that?
And we fell in love with EOS also because we began working with an amazing implementer, Anastasia Toomey.
She is the best.
Who,
shout out,
over the last couple of years, she has really pushed us in all the ways that you would want an amazing coach and guide and advisor to push you. And so we know from the inside the impact that the EOS methodology has had for us, and it's allowed me to really progress from wearing a lot of the hats on the accountability chart to now really focusing primarily on the visionary role for Amplify. So that's been really exciting. And just like our experience, any business who is really committed to an operating system like EOS is going through some sort of transformation journey that is really exciting. So they're not just stagnant, they're not plateaued. And that's really attractive for us as well, because it's really more about opportunity that is available to grow and to increase the impact of what's happening through the business, whoever we're serving. And so the specific way that looks, and anybody who's ever tried to go through some sort of transformation, getting better at anything, the two bookends that Brittany was talking about, you have this outcome that you care about.
Yep.
But then there are all these activities there, and so the opportunity that we see within the EOS, if you read traction, or if you're going all in and trying to build out your VTO and your scorecard, there is a gap sometimes that surfaces when you say, this is what I hope a year from now revenue and profit looks like. And this is what a good week in the business looks like today. Now, the trap that you can fall into sometimes is that the targets that you set for those activities, whether it's sales activities or profit goals on the weekly scorecard, that may reflect where the business is at today. But if you're a $5 million business and you want to become an $8 million business by the end of the year, you have to set those targets toward the 8 million outcome. Yeah. And that's the trap that we see a lot of people. And it creates a frustration when you get halfway through the year and you realize, the sales team is celebrating because all their numbers are green on the scorecard. And they log into 90 and they're seeing good results on the scorecard. But the leadership team is looking at the progress toward the annual goals from a revenue standpoint, and they're going, what did we do? We're not on track. And so that disconnect can be very directly and powerfully bridged by looking at the financial performance of the business. And so Anastasia and some other EOS implementers have been really encouraging us to simplify what it looks like to connect the scorecard to the VTO. And we have put together something we call Cash Flow Mountain, which is a very simplified view. We kind of have thought about, in the same way that Donald Miller has simplified marketing, through story brand work, we want to approach numbers with that similar lens of saying, how can we take something that's really complicated and overwhelming maybe for people and create a simplified visual and framework that someone can follow, like water flowing down a mountain. How do dollars flow through your business? And how does your sales and marketing team send water down the mountain? How's your ops team manage the flow of water really efficiently? And then what happens when it gets down to the bottom? And Brittany was talking about life of meaning. We call in the visual the ultimate outcome of the business is Life of Meaning Lodge, and it's sitting right next to Opportunities Pond. And it's just this beautiful little picture of, what are we working toward here? Like, what's the system really designed to produce? And that's been really exciting because ultimately, and if you've ever worked with a leadership team in any capacity, or if you've ever played the telephone game, what can happen sometimes is one person understands the true message of what's happening, and understands the financial picture of the business. But the challenge can be you turn and try to communicate that to the next person, like the telephone game, and it can get overwhelming pretty quick. So what we found is even when business leaders and business owners are familiar with looking at the P&L or balance sheet, really what we're trying to equip them with is an opportunity to align the rest of their team. And we had somebody we met at the conference last year at our booth who said, I pulled up the Cash Flow Mountain visual and shared it with our leadership team. We have 80 employees who their bonus structure is tied to the EBITDA pond the after operating expenses and what's happening with operating profit. So it was complicated for a lot of their team members to understand, how do we work together and how does the sales team influence our profitability? And the bonus structure became clear when he put it on the screen and said, this right here, this is what we're trying to maximize, and we can all work toward this common goal. So really at the end of the day, it's all about alignment. It's all about making sure that everyone's on the same page.
That probably becomes a really powerful tool for coaches to help draw that line of connecting, because I think that is something that I can speak to an organization that I was at, and it was hard. It was a high-end residential landscape company. So, I mean, you've got a massive mix of field workers into management into actual executive leadership. And the executive leadership team, we were all meeting on a quarterly basis, thinking strategically, always in really understood, had a deep understanding of that. And then you got down to the management layer, and then even down the field work, and it's like I want to get as many hours as I can and work as much overtime as I can. That was just the philosophy, right? And I think the owner actually did a really good job of this, but I feel like for specifically owners and coaches that are working with owners and leadership teams, that could actually be a huge asset to help educate, because you guys talk a lot about financial literacy, right? Which I think is something that is lacking. And so how would you recommend, coaches and consultants that are maybe in complementary industries, right? Maybe like an operations, like a fractional integrator or an EOS implementer is a good example. Like, what is the partnership is the word that comes to mind. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but like, how do they tap into the resources that you all have to kind of benefit their clients?
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the really fun things about Cashflow Mountain is that we sort of originally put Ben to the task. We're like, okay, you're the visionary, go, set up the ecosystem. We had known for a while, we like to be creative. We love a metaphor. If you hang out with us very long, everything's in metaphors. And we were like,
songwriter.
Let's create something that we can use to anchor all these conversations for our clients, right? But then after Ben created it and we've been sharing it with teams, we've realized it, and it had come because implementers had specifically asked for financial literacy. But it's now become this really fun thing that's sort of taken on a life of its own as we've seen like coaches and implementers and people be able to use it just as a landscape, like as an easy place to anchor conversations. And that's been really fun. We were talking to some coaches recently that are putting it in their kind of playbook, and they're like, we want all our coaches to have access to this. But I think when you're having this conversation and you're the coach and you have a pretty good financial understanding, whether or not that's your background, kind of generally know how cash flows through a business, to be able to have a visual to just anchor that conversation, and one that makes sense. So it's like, okay, here is where money comes down like rain, right? And the cool part is in the visual, it shows where each, part of your team has the biggest impact. So it's like, okay, your marketing team, you're trying to capture as much of this rain, into this pump house as possible. And then it's going to flow down here. And then, some of it's going to run off here for your cogs, and so you're seeing how does it flow down into this opportunities pond at the bottom, where ultimately that's where you want it. But you're going to take some of that and you're going to reinvest it back in your business. And so the fun thing has been seeing coaches say, like, I'm trying to have these conversations with my clients, but it's a little bit hard to communicate if we're not talking about the same thing, if people don't really understand these terms. And so just giving a landscape. So we're always just trying to give it away. We're like, use it, please use it. It's a free resource. But that has kind of been a delight for us, is people being like, this is what I've wanted to make this conversation easier. And at the end of the day, it's like, that's something we deeply care about. Like, if coaches have stronger conversations with their clients around finances, like, that's super fun for us to be part of.
And I was showing it to someone yesterday, and she is a marketing expert, and she loved it because it's something she could pull up on her screen to communicate the work, the value of the work she does.
Yep.
Yes.
And if she helps win for the business, what that represents, what they are able to see is how it's tied to their longest term goals. And that's what's always important in our opinion, is that business owners understand, or any team member understands, how they fit in the big picture. Because otherwise it can feel like you're just showing up to the same work day after day, and it's mind-numbing. So it's a little bit, it's so important that whether it's a leadership team using something like Cashflow Mountain to objectively cut through one person's argument versus another, there's a lot of emotion that can fly in a conversation if it's untethered to something that's measurable and objective. And so what we have seen is there's an opportunity, whether it's someone from the outside or somebody on the inside of the leadership team, being able to speak to what's happening and use simplified language that everyone can understand.
Yeah. And there's just something too, like aligning teams, like you talk about, in the EOS world, you hear this a lot, but kind of that visionary coming in. You've got your finance person, doing, reporting, doing these day-to-day things, and the visionaries just blowing it up, like coming in and being like, what if we do this? What if we do this? And
Wait a
even
second, I'm a
to
visionary.
just have like, even just to understand from a visual perspective, like you can take all the water out of this place right now and you can divert it all over here. But you need to understand that you're going to have less you won't then have it for this. Or so just, taking the emotion out. And like, there is only a certain amount of cash in the bank. Like this is your cash flow situation. And you can choose to make this decision, or you might wait for 3 months and make this decision. Right. And so as people are coaching and guiding even visionaries and their finance teams, like kind of having that clarity of like, here is the cost of doing this. It may be worth it. It may not. There's a limited resource. If you put it here, you'll have less here,
And the fun part then is setting that picture in motion. So it's what we talk about a lot of times is this is a snapshot of the current version of the business. But what often, again, if a business is going through some sort of transformation, we have to almost duplicate that picture and say, okay, well, what would happen now if we reinvest some of these dollars into a new machine and we become more efficient, or if we order inventory in bulk and save a few pennies on the dollar for every unit we sell. That becomes a way of evaluating two different versions of the same business, but a pre-decision, post-decision. How do those play together? And like Brittany was talking about earlier, what if we raise prices and some of our subscribers churn? The complicated combinations of multiple variables. That's where we see the power of not just taking that snapshot, but saying, what does Cash Flow Mountain look like 6 months from now if we do X, Y, and Z? And it opens up maybe new flow in different ways, or we're more efficient in the way that we let the water flow down the mountain. So that's where it becomes really fun and dynamic. And the importance then becomes, really predicting the future and being able to say, the only way we can really confidently know whether we should go left or right as we encounter this crossroads as a business is we have to understand what's past, this what we can see in front of us. So we kind of use the metaphor, as Brittany was saying, we love metaphors, but like a GPS for the business. So it's not even just, you hear a lot of people talk about, well, if you don't have any insights in your numbers, it's like driving, looking in the rearview mirror. You're only looking at numbers in the past. And I've heard other people say, well, what we do is, we clear the windshield and so you can see what's ahead. And that's great too. What I believe we're able to do is create not just what you can see through the windshield, but far into the distance, past what's visual. Like we're able to look at many routes toward the same outcome. And I think that's really critical when you talk about, and again, coming back to why we love EOS, there's an invitation to set a 10-year target there. So if you're thinking about and dreaming and hoping for something that is way out in the distance, we have to have some sort of mechanism to show what that path looks like from here to there.
Yeah, that's so, I love this because you can, obviously your 10-year target can be, in a little aspirational, kind of up in the clouds, here's where we're going. But you start to get that 3-year and even that 1 year, if you want to be aggressive, a lot of it is gut based, where it's like, well, in order to get to this big, hairy, aspirational thing, like we have to be aggressive, but then how we actually get there. So that's fascinating because this actually ties really well into another competency that we talk about a lot. And it's one of those, it's kind of a sneaky competency for business coaches, but it's mastery. It's kind of how do you have the additional tools in your tool belt that you can bring out in certain situations. And I think this is a perfect example of that, because I think the elite coaches, I think a lot of coaches and consultants start out and they think they have to be all things to all men, right? They go in and they have to have the answer for every single thing. And then you get down the path and you realize, okay, this is a lot deeper, or we need to bring the experts, which is where there are a lot of, that's where I think a lot of fractionals and consultants come in, because coaches really got into being coaches because they want to work with improving businesses and working with leadership teams and facilitation, and that's what they're good at. And I will never forget, I had a conversation with an EOS implementer one time, and he was talking about, he said, hey, if you can equip me to be able to talk about whatever it is you're, doing for 30, 60 minutes, where I can be the hero and go and execute and talk about that and then pass to you. Because he said, I don't want to be the expert on finance or marketing or whatever it is, but give me enough to where I can go out and talk. And I think that's a great example of him tapping into mastery, because he wants to have enough to where he can kind of have that financial literacy, but not necessarily have to be the expert in the field. So he brings someone like you guys in where they're going and struggling with something. And so I see how Cashflow Mountain is a perfect anchor point for, hey, let's get coaches enough, where they can talk educated about this. And then, all right, hey, this client really needs specialized help or whatever it is. We're going to bring in the big guns of Ben and Brittany to come in and kind of talk through things. But like, let's talk a little bit. If a coach, let's just say, wants to raise their level of financial literacy, right? There may be, like, let's take me talk to me as marketing guy, sitting in like a fractional CRO role, pride profession. So sales and marketing, that is as far away from numbers as you can possibly get. Usually it's the sales guy being like, yo, can we squeak this deal? And, but let's talk to someone like me who maybe doesn't have a lot of financial literacy. What would be 2, 3, 1, maybe what tools or concepts would you lean into to try to improve my knowledge of that discipline?
Yeah, I would. What I was on a call last week with 120 entrepreneurs, nonprofits, different varying levels of comfort, around looking at the numbers. The encouragement I gave was just start somewhere. So like if you have the ability to open up a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet statement, what we are trying to transform is the habits that exist maybe where a bookkeeper is sending the business owner the P&L every month and you get an email and maybe you just mark it as unread. That's the first problem we see sometimes. You don't even open it, right? The second thing that we see is if people do open it, they're looking at the top line. That's an easy one to understand. Here's how much we made from a revenue standpoint. Scroll down to the bottom. Did we make more than we spent? That's also a good checkpoint to look at. But there's a lot in between there. Yep. And then the next thing that somebody might do is go, okay, I'm just going to open my bank account and see where we sit right now. And those practical steps, while they can be helpful, they never show the full picture. But it does tell you, obviously, some helpful information of how did we do last month? Are we performing well? Are we sitting in an okay spot right now? But there's just, because it doesn't show the whole picture, then it can be this complicated tangle of emotion. It's kind of like, are we okay though? Really? And so what we always want to encourage folks to do is begin to look at the different checkpoints that we have in the Cashflow Mountain visual, because if you can just scroll, literally they're laid out the way that you would scroll down a profit and loss statement, and you would see the sections. And there are different ways that you could look at the total amounts of the categories. So if you're a manufacturing business and you have right beneath revenue, then you have your cost of goods. You have sort of all the variable expenses that are tied to, we're going to spend more here if we sell more product, right? So that's going to fluctuate a lot. But what it'll show you is, how much are we making? If you look at after those expenses, you can look at a percentage view of even that number and say, okay, out of every dollar that we brought in as a business, how many pennies were absorbed by just making the sale? And what's left then to cover things like rent and some of the salary expenses and some of the overhead. That's where you hear terms like break even, and that may be obvious to some people, it may be confusing to others, but then when you say, okay, well, how many dollars do we need to generate then to offset and really just hit the equal amount of what our fixed expenses of running the business are every month? So there's some practical ways that you can just start looking at these shapes and just starting to play a little bit of like a Sherlock role in the business, because if you start looking, you're going to find things that go, oh, I wonder why that's that way. And that's just the beginning of the practical and intentional new territory that you might be able to enter into, to just start asking good questions. And the other tool that I would just encourage, like, AI is amazing at answering some of these complicated, not that you want to just upload your,
Yeah, wouldn't
sensitive
recommend
document up to,
Yeah.
but to ask certain questions of, okay, I'm this kind of business. What are some things that I might want to look at my P&L and have in mind? That's a great place to start. It's really like having a partner in looking at the numbers and going into, it's almost like having a guide into a scary, new territory. And you're like, I'm in the wild here. What do I look for? And at the heart of even why we started Amplify, it was to help democratize insights for business owners. So it got me, I was working due diligence, sitting down with these founders, and realized 10 minutes into a conversation, I might know more about their business than they do. And they're in it all day, pouring themselves into it. And that got me on a heart level, because I was like, I want you to see your numbers the way that an investor might look at your numbers, and look at the future with all that sort of growth potential in mind. And in a similar way, some people might feel threatened by AI coming in and the ways that it might, in our perspective, it's an amazing democratization of insights for business owners everywhere. So as you look at the numbers, don't be afraid to just pull in, your favorite AI and just say, how can I look at this? This is new territory for me. I feel nervous. Like, what should I be looking at, and how can I think about these things?
Let's say they're all thinking, okay, the numbers look fine, but something seems just off. We can't put a finger. What would you recommend a coach in that situation? Kind of what are the prodding questions, or how do they kind of get to that deeper level where you kind of get the team to be Sherlock, where they're like looking in? What are some of the prompts that you would recommend that a coach can kind of open the jar, if you will, to get a little bit deeper?
Yeah, I almost think of the way a doctor might approach, if you're a patient
Yeah.
walking into a doctor's office and you say, this just kind of hurts, like, what, and I think the first step is like, where does it hurt? Understanding literally, like, Cole, who pulled up the Cashville Mountain visual with his team, is like, right there, like, this is the spot that really matters. I think it's really just understanding, okay, as a starting point, let's just anchor into where it feels strange, like there's something not quite right in which area. And that's the first spot where everybody can go, okay, let's zoom in there, and let's really drill into what's happening in operating expenses. Something feels funny here. Okay. Then the next step can be, well, how long has it looked like this? As you're looking at, or how long has it felt like this? So being able to look at maybe it's a single line item, like, why is our insurance costs this way? And then you can dig into the past 6 months, or even further back, and say, has it always been this sort of expense level, or has it always looked this way, or has something changed that's causing, one thing that happens sometimes is there's a annual payment due with something like insurance, and it can come out of the nowhere, it feels like. And that's part of the emotional roller coaster that we see businesses on, where you just don't know to anticipate that. Even though it's coming, it was always coming, but because you didn't know it was coming, it feels like a surprise, and it feels like something's really drastically wrong, maybe. But all that's happening is, hey, actually, you might zoom out far enough and say, actually, last April, we had this same expense. So maybe there's nothing out of line here. Or you might say, you know what, this is a lot higher than it has been. And then the other question is it higher than we expect it to be? And that's where you're starting to look at more of like, if you look at the financial statement, like a profit and loss, one thing you can do is say, how did we do versus last month? Or how do we do looking same month last year? And that's one comparison you can do. That's backwards facing. The other kind of troubleshooting Sherlock test is, how did these numbers look compared to what we planned on? And that's a different way of, you have to look ahead and set some sort of forecast or budget. Yeah. And that's really where you get ahead of some of those emotional bumps in the road, where you go, why is it going to be this? If you build a good forecast, you're going to know, okay, every April, this expense pops into the picture. So as we're looking at the overall picture, and then we compare the results of April, we're not just comparing them against the past, we're comparing them against the plan. And that reveals, we have a process we go through called a map review. So we're on a journey, we know exactly where we should be, and the rhythm we can go through to look at the numbers. And this is something we encourage every business we work with, or even folks that we don't work with, just introduce some sort of rhythm every 30 days. As the financials close out, MAP stands for measure, adjust, predict. It's an opportunity to compare either what happened versus what we planned on happening. That's the ideal. If you don't have a forecast, then compare what happened versus what had happened recently or same month last year. And then if you do have a forecast, that allows you to adjust. You can get into the formulas of the, everything that's driving the financial picture, and you can tweak things and say, now we learned something new, we're going to go into the model and adjust that. And then that allows us to go to this third step, which is predict. And so measure, adjust, predict, we can zoom back out and see the impact of those changes to the model, and see not just the one path forward, but like a GPS, multiple routes forward into the future, and be able to see, do we like where this is heading now? Do we need to make some drastic course correction? But really, it all starts with just having some sort of small step into it and going, how do we pinpoint where it hurts? Does this seem normal, or is it not normal?
Yeah.
Well, and you'll hear, we're talking a lot about forecasts, and it's interesting with the idea of forecasting because it can be a little hard. We talk about it almost like, kind of bookkeeping and reporting and stuff can be more like classical music, and then forecasting is more like jazz, and it's a different skill set. It can be very uncomfortable for people, or it can kind of feel like a novelty because it's like, well, you can't predict the future. But if you have some kind of a forecast that's visual, that makes sense to you, even if it's really simple, you get to do, when you're talking about being a coach and you're walking, with a business and they, feel like something's off, or they have these concerns and worries. One of the best parts about a forecast is that you can do scenario planning, and actually plan out your worst case scenario. So it's funny because we always think like, oh yeah, I could have a forecast to kind of see, how everything's going to grow and all that. But some of the biggest value actually comes when you've got, you're coaching, you're working with a business, and they have fears, right? Like all of us running businesses, we have fears. What if X happens? And the beauty of a forecast is you get to say, okay, what is this fear? Like, what are you worried about? What's keeping you up at night? So, okay, say this happens. Let's make a plan. And then you kind of take the fear out of it. It's like, what you do mentally sometimes where you're like, all right, worst case scenario. But having a plan for that and knowing like my business can actually weather a down economy for a little bit, or, we can handle it if we have this much churn or whatever. So, even as a coach, thinking about how do you dig in a little bit to those worst case scenarios, and how do you guide your client in planning so they get a little bit of that peace of mind in addition to the conversation of what if everything goes great. Those are both part of the same conversation. So
that probably does subside those nerves, because it's like, oh, okay, it's actually not, I mean, maybe it is really bad, but or it's
right.
Probably, oh, okay, that's like worst case, okay. Yep. And here's best case, it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle, like realistically. And so that probably does help set expectations, which is such a value add to a coach. So let's talk process here for a second. When is the right time where, let's keep the hospital analogy going, right? All right, patient comes in, all right, this hurts, how long, blah, blah, blah. We're kind of identifying on the coach, kind of figuring that out. There comes a point sometimes where it's, okay, yeah, you need to go to a foot specialist. We need to get somebody to like take a look at why you have 18 toes, or whatever. Like, and so like when is that, what does that look like as far as, okay, hey, this is a little bit bigger or more, not severe, but serious, or we just need to bring in somebody that can really take a look, has the right tool set, skill set, background to take a look. Like, what does that look like for you guys from, I mean, if we want to just call it from a referral standpoint, most of our audience will understand that. Like, what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's when people most feel their need for this, it's they're about to make a big decision. Or, we work with businesses all the time where it's like someone's trying to hand the business down to the next person or the next generation and they have a lot of questions, or they're just expanding and they're thinking about that second location, or that's usually when the need is so strong. And if you're coaching someone, it's like, the complexity. Like, we had one of our clients was like, man, when I started my business, it felt like a lemonade stand. I understood, like, I sell the product, I get the money, here's my profit. But as you grow, and the good, it's a good sign that you're growing, but the complexity gets pretty intense and it can be really hard. So when people tend to bring us in, is that having that forecast and having like the financial picture would anchor their conversation, right? Around a big decision, around some of these complexities. What if multiple things happen at the same time? And then if you're the one coaching and you're like, man, I would love if we were all looking at a clear picture and we were able to ask multiple questions at once. And then, you're a good coach, so you know how to lead your client. It's just, how do I have, almost like an x-ray or something, right? If you're like coming in and you're like, all right, I'm the doctor, I'm going to go send you for an x-ray and then I can give you my best advice based on what I see. I think it's generally around big decisions.
Yeah, and what we see is there are so many amazing experts and coaches and advisors who have different areas of expertise than we do. So they're helping the business owners in their specific ways, and they're specialists, right? So they are able to push them into new territory. And where we see the opportunity to come in and really make sure that the transformation is happening the way everybody wants is that there's a bottleneck that shows up, and it's in the head of the leadership team. It's the founders or the leaders of the entrepreneurs is saying, I know what I should do, but I feel a little unsure and hesitant to move forward with this big decision. Even though I know it makes sense, my heart's there, my head's there, but they're not connected for some reason. And really, there's an opportunity to reveal what the path will look like if they take this big decision. And like Brittany was saying, sometimes it's the worst case scenario where if things go poorly, just showing that there could be a good contingency plan, we're going to do X, Y, Z before we ever hit that spot, but we're going to see well in advance that we're going in a direction that we want to course correct from. So we see a lot of times the work can be unleashed in some ways that other coaches are doing with, whether they're working on the ops side or in sales and marketing. But if there are huge decisions, like Brittany was talking about, big decisions that are going to change the long-term direction of the business, and there's hesitancy there to move forward in a way that everyone agrees this is where we should go, but somebody's dragging their feet, usually there's a chance to just say, we're going to put all of this into one common language and put a dollar sign in front of everything that we're looking at. And not because dollars are the most important thing, but because we are going to measure, the way that dollars will be impacted by, and all the moving parts that are tied to a big decision like buying a business or making a major hire within the company. We're going to measure all that in dollars, because we also know at the end of the day, dollars are just means to an end that come back to like, will this help support the long-term life of meaning kind of goals of the business, And so we want to be able to tie those big decisions. So think rocks in some ways for, those are the kinds of big, next 3 months, we're going to be looking at moving forward with these big new endeavors. We want to show the impact of how and when those can happen.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Such a important thing, regardless. I mean, even outside of the US ecosystem, but I think you guys are spot on. I mean, there's just it allows you to kind of move a little bit quicker in the US space, but what a gap you are filling to help so many business owners. So I appreciate you guys coming on and sharing all your wisdom. This has been so much fun. I've taken away so many things. I'm not as scared of finances anymore. So job well done. But I always like to ask guests on kind of tail end, and you guys can answer this however you want, if you want to answer it individually or collectively, whatever you want. But first question is, if you could go back to rookie Ben and Brittany, just starting out in your career, you can take it career with your specific practice. I mean, however you want to take this, but with all the knowledge and experience that you guys have now, what advice would you tell yourselves?
Our first client, who, when I was sitting down in the due diligence conversations, and Josh said, "Hey, we love the way you're looking at our numbers. Could we just meet with you every month and you keep us on track? And we don't actually want to sell part of our business." I think he was realizing there's another way to grow the business than doing what Shark Tank says, which is go sell part of your business to investors. That'll solve everything. So Josh said, "Hey, could we just meet with you every month?" The first couple months together, he brought traction to our meeting. And
Really?
he said,
I didn't know that.
He said, this book is a perfect fit for the way we're looking at, like, we've created these long-term goals, and we're looking at these variables and the way we're modeling everything and saying, if we do X, Y, or Z and spend this much on marketing, and there's this ROI on our spend, like, it's going to result in this sort of revenue. Like, he presented me with the EOS methodology, and it took years
So
before
long ago.
it all clicked for me. Like, I loved it, I appreciated it, and read the book, and it was awesome. But before I realized, oh my goodness, this is exactly home base for us, not just as a company, that we should be running on EOS with Anastasia's help. And then also, any business running on EOS, these are the perfect building blocks for us to really step in and tie them together in that next layer of meaning.
I think
That's
I would
good.
just say being patient. Like, when you're running a business, when you're starting a business, you always think like it's about, it's just going to be quick and easy. And it's like, it's a long endeavor, and you have to put in your time, and you have to kind of get those 10,000 hours and get your experience. And so I think just the goodness of some of that work and that cultivation, that it's not fast, but it is, I think it's good. But I want to hear, what about you, Cam?
Oh man. I resonate with the patience thing, but I think, if I would say just presence, be in the moment, which is kind of piggybacking off of what you're saying. I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there is something special about the journey that I think sometimes you can be so forward focused, and I'm just a big picture visionary. Like, I'm always thinking 10 years out. That's just the way God made me. And there's a lot of benefit to that, but the potential, not downside, but risk of that is that you don't live in the moment, and the lessons and the catalysts of growth is in the moment. And so I think sometimes that's just been lost in me specifically. And so I think that's, if I would look back and, it's been kind of a wild journey, and it's really taken off in the last couple of years, but just being in that moment, I think is so important. You can miss a lot. So I think that's the advice that I say, hey, just be present in the moment and be comfortable in that, sit in it. It's okay.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I think one of the things that happens ironically when you say, we're going to look to the future, you can get sucked into that and go, I'm just going to always be looking 3 steps ahead of where I'm standing right now.
Yeah.
That's a trap. But I think in a neat way, Cam, what you were just describing, being present, you can actually be present in some ways because or have some intentional thought put into how is the future going to play out? If it's ambiguous and it feels like this massive, region of darkness, there's no way to narrow that region of darkness into at least like, this is how the paths look like they could play forward. But you hold it loosely and open-handedly. The best way to make God laugh is to tell him your plans. I heard somebody say, it's like
so true.
it's there's unique irony here where we're saying like, yes, plan the future.
Right.
It's not about control.
Yeah.
It's not about saying like, you have to know exactly how the next 10 years are going to play out.
You're not going to be right.
The goal, yeah, I think, yes, we talk about life of meaning as if it's somewhere out there, but Cam, what you just said is beautiful. It's really about enjoying the things that God's provided and given us today. And, so I think the other encouragement I would give my younger self too is like, go to the lake with the kids, coach their teams, go on date night, do the things that may feel like, like you haven't earned them yet or whatever. I don't know if that makes sense, but just enjoy the things that are in front of you that God's provided, and don't say, well, someday I'll take advantage of or be able to. So don't let the perfect get in the way of the good, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. We're preaching. Come on now. Somebody needs to hear that.
I don't think I said any Bible verses, though. That's the only thing. I'm preaching with like good.
That's true. That's true. We don't want to know that. Just feel good stuff. No, it's and then the second question, and I'm really interested because this segues really well into it. What is a lesson that you guys are in just the middle of learning right now in this moment? We'll take it to the present.
Yeah, I mean, as a segue off of that, something we've started talking a little more about, and I think practicing more in our own lives, is sort of as you have that life of meaning conversation. This is kind of what Ben's getting at, and you're saying, in 10 years I would love to have XYZ or do these things. Then the second question with that is always like, what part of those meaningful things is available to you right now? And so, for example, for us, it's like we love to get our kids on the lake. We love to, we have our kids are 5th generation to visit this one lake, and it's a really special place for us. We have not bought a lake house. We haven't done, but we have this really old ski boat from the 1970s, and we rent the same house every year. And it's like and that's even, we've had seasons we couldn't even do that. But I think just what's like the smaller, more practical way that I can enjoy this thing? Because sometimes the really simple version of something, instead of like, someday I'm going to buy a wake boat and have a lake house. And it's like, that also introduces some complexity. So how do you, or if you care about generosity, it's like, how are you practicing? Like, yes, you may have goals of like starting a nonprofit or fully funding a nonprofit, or, we have clients we work with who really care about affordable housing, or, these really big goals that are really incredible and generous. But how do you enjoy sort of the heart of that thing right now? Because I think just to, continue what we were just saying, you can spend all your time now working toward a big goal and missing the ways that you can be part of those things now. Especially for parents, especially, for people who have people in their lives right now who are in unique seasons. You can't use money later to buy your time back. And so how are you living into those things now? Because then it's like, whether or not you hit that huge goal, you don't have to have the regret of missing out on those things.
Yeah, I would say my lesson that we're learning right now is just the importance of the right people on the team. We have an amazing integrator that we just brought onto the team, and Jeff is awesome, and he it's like Brittany has jokingly referred to him as my business spouse, because as a visionary integrator, you're very much like linked, right? And we talked to a good number of people before feeling like he was the right fit for us, because the reality is it is like a marriage in some ways. And as you grow a team, whether it's investors or team members, you really are going to be encountering a lot of unknown situations together that you just have to say, do we have the DNA together to endure this and go through and be resourceful and creative in our problem solving together? So just, I think, alignment from a relational standpoint and giftings and skill sets and personalities, it's so important to just enjoy the people that we are on the journey with. I think that's what it comes down to. And so I'm thankful that we have found amazing people. God's provided incredible folks to join us on the Amplify team. And I feel like that sets us up to avoid some of the distractions that might arise if there is team tension sometimes, or we're not all on the same page. So it feels like all of our energy gets to go toward, how can we serve more people? How can we do this work in a more powerful way, and we're all kind of aligned in that way. So that's the lesson there, I would say, is it was worth talking to a lot of not right fits to find the right fit, and to not compromise and think, oh, we're going to check the box and fill the integrator role in the business, and that solves everything. Again, it's not, just having somebody in the seat doesn't fix it. It has to be the right person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? What are you learning?
I knew I wasn't going to get out of that one.
Hey, you're interviewing a journalist.
You're learning that you're going to be on the hot seat if you
Don't
talk
interview
to us.
people.
Yeah, it's fair. That's fair. I think on top of the presence thing, because that's just a lesson that's just God has placed me in, and just is consistently kind of harping on in a good way. But I think kind of off of that is just the importance of like tapping into the creative energy that I have, because I'm a strategist by heart. That's like one of my strengths finders. Top 5 is strategic, and then I'm also futuristic, and so it's like I'm constantly like in execution mode, you know what I mean? And I think I obviously guitar. I own a lot of guitars. I have a lot of musical equipment. I'm looking at drums right now, a keyboard, amps, and I love, and I've played in multiple bands, and when you get busy, that's often the first thing to go. And I feel like I'm the most genuine, authentic self when I'm playing music, and I think if I'm not doing that, that is like almost a little bit of a danger zone, like not a red flag, but like an orange flag, where it's kind of like you're not in a good spot, and so I think taking time to go play and just sit down with the guitar. So I actually moved my acoustic downstairs that's like in a place where I will pick it up and play it, and so it's like, to me, that's something that just I am better for that. It's almost like a regulation aspect for me. And so I think for a while there I didn't play, and I still loved it. I would just pick it up every once in a while if I play at church or something. But the enjoyment of playing music, I think, can be lost when you get busy. And so I think that's something that I'm just kind of trying to introduce that back into my life. So
yeah, but I think as parents too, it's so important to model that.
It is.
And include, like, one of the most fun things for me, yes, I was getting paid to write songs at one point in my career, but I've had more fun writing songs with our kids and like playing music with them than I probably ever had living in Nashville. So it's sort of like, it's just been a fun thing to experience. So.
Shout out Hoot and the Hollers. I'm going to link to that. Now, we didn't even talk about that, but Ben's got an awesome little kids album. It's awesome. Would like to point out that it was in my Spotify. I was number 2 in artists was Hoot and the Hollers, so Cooper and myself included. Hey,
Cam, show them the tattoo that you got.
right. Yeah. I am a true fan. I'm by far their top fan. No, well, cool. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on and sharing your wisdom, your passion, your expertise. I think of you guys as really good friends, and I love and appreciate you guys, and I believe in what you guys are doing. And so thank you for coming and believing in me, number one, and also coming on the show and just talking. So let's say if somebody wants to get in touch with you, like, what is the best place to learn more about Amplify, about you guys? I mean, where can people go?
Ben's pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can follow Ben Cooper on LinkedIn.
Nobody wants to find me on LinkedIn. Go to amplify.business. Amplify.business. You'll see everything.
People buy from humans, man. LinkedIn knows that. They built their whole thing on that.
I do love connecting
You're
with people.
pretty good on LinkedIn, but also amplify.business.
Yeah, and you'll see the Cashflow Mountain visual there as well. So it's like, if you're curious about that, that's a good spot to see it.
But if you want to see random pictures of our kids, no, just kidding, go to LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn.
Nice.
We do have 4.
You gotta humanize it, right?
Yeah.
100%.
I love that. We'll link out to all that on the show notes too. And yeah, we can put some even direct links to Cashflow Mountain, because I know we talked a lot about that. So we can put some direct things to that, because I think you have actually a PDF that people can download, which is really cool.
Yeah, please use it. Yeah.
Well, awesome.
Thanks
Well,
for
thank you
having
guys.
us.
Yeah,
Appreciate it a lot.
It's been fun. Round 2, I think we killed it. So
Yeah.
I
Round
love
3.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
there we go. Oh gosh, if that is the universe is telling us not to post this.
No.
No. Well, cool. Well, thank you all for watching. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and stay tuned for more episodes.
That's it for today's episode of the Ambitious Coach Lab. My hope is that something here helps you sharpen your craft and keep building a coaching practice you're proud of. Before we wrap, a quick thank you to our sponsor, 90. If you're coaching leadership teams, having your clients run their entire world in 90 truly elevates your work. Vision, rocks, scorecards, issues, it all lives in one centralized place. The clarity keeps your clients aligned between sessions and makes every conversation you have with them more focused and more impactful. I've used 90 with over 500 leadership teams, and I can tell you it makes great companies better and great coaches even more effective. Feel free to use promo code AC20 for 20% off. Again, that's AC20 for 20% off. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'm Cam, cheering you on as you grow your ambitious coaching practice. We'll see you next time.